Okay, so now let's jump into the domain number three, right? So we have finished the domain number one, which is cybersecurity principles. We have done the domain two, which is IRBC and DR. And the third domain is about the access control, right? And this is again, I would say, uh, as we said, right? This is again one of the important thing to understand, right? When we say about cybersecurity, what type of controls we could have, right? And as I said, cybersecurity normally when we think, mostly we think about technical controls, like the one we see in the movies, people are hacking and people are accessing the system and access granted and password stolen and whatsoever. This is all technical. But at the end of the day, when we say about access control, it's not about the technical. It's all about making sure that we limit the access, right? Mean that who has required access, they get access, no one else get it, right? So means that in order to control the access to anything, we have to make sure that it's not just technical, we also have physical and administrative controls in place. So keep in mind, right? So technical is not sufficient to protect an asset from any wrongdoings, right? So in this chapter, in this domain, we're going to study some of the thing. This chapter is focusing more on physical and logical. Logical means technical control. Physical means physical control. And administrative control normally is the policies and procedures that organizations make to make sure that who's allowed to access certain things or not. These are the policies and procedure thing. IC2 have not discussed that, but this is just a common understanding, right? You make the documentation and policies and make sure that people are following those policies. But in this domain, we're going to study the physical and technical controls that organization normally enforce, right? This is more of an enforcement. You can imagine that administrative is more the documentation of the policies, and how that policies got enforced is through physical and technical control. So this is important. So for access control, on the right side, you see that, right? So this is the asset that we are trying to protect, right? In order to protect this asset could be anything. It could be, let's say, a server or file or your important document or whatsoever, or could be, let's say, something important document which has the maybe a printed document putting in a file and somewhere making sure that your company has some business secrets documented there or something like that. So you have to make sure that administrative control means that you have the policies and procedures to protect that. Second thing, you have the uh, logical controls means that you deploy some technologies to access to who can access, who cannot access, deny access, and all that. And third thing is the physical control means that if, let's say, if it is a file, no one should go to near to that safe where I'm keeping the file, right? Or safe password will be only for those who have allowed to open the safe, right? It could be like if I'm putting a server and server is very critical, having a lot of critical data, then this server should be in a rack or in a cabinet and in a lock cabinet or something like that. Physical security is there. So means that we have multiple layers of defense, and this multiple layers of defense is called DID, defense in depth, right? This is the multiple layers of defense means that if you break one layer, there's always a second layer trying to protect it, right? So understand the concept of defense in depth. We cannot rely only on one mechanism that we do it one security and we think it's enough. That's the reason you see now most of the tools and application you have. Old days we used to have only username and password, right? The point is that now everyone people have become so vulnerable in a sense that hackers are trying to crack your password. They're trying to break into your password. A lot of people are putting the easy password, my birthday or my whatever the keywords they have. So it's so easy for them to crack it. So that's the reason companies now came up with the even the like the apps that you use on the Facebook, Twitter, and all that. They come with a multi-factor authentication. Means that your username password is not enough. They send you a code on the phone, right? So this is the second factor. Means this is a layer defense. Means that even your password is cracked, whoever have access to your phone, only those can get into, right? Because they send a code or SMS or something, right? So this anything you do multiple line of defense is called defense in depth. So this was about the defense in depth. Now, very important concept that will you should understand here now is subject, object, and the rules. This is very important because point is that end of the day we are trying to protect some asset. Asset could be a file, server, computer, document, whatever, right? It could be an asset. Means that the thing that you are trying to protect, right? We have to make sure that we understand that object, right? The thing that we are trying to protect is called object, right? Whatever could be in normally IT world, that could be a server, that could be a file, Google document, or whatever, right? It could be an object, means the thing that we are trying to protect. And the people who have access to that means the subject who will be working on it, right? The subject are the persons or individuals who are trying to access that object, right? So subject are the persons, the people who are trying to access certain things, and the things are called object. And the rules defines what level of access they have, right? Means that if I'm the owner of a file, yes, I can create the file, I can delete the file. But if I'm not the owner of a file, I should not have the right to delete it. Same thing, right? In the Google document, in the Google Drive that I have shared, all of you have access to view the file, but you don't have access to delete the file, right? If you are able to delete the file, means that rules are not set properly. Means that you are giving more access than you are required. So in an example where we have, let's say, Google Drive, right? So you have Google Drive, and that's where we have these files saved, right? This is the Google Drive, and we are keeping the file saved. So this Google Drive files or this Google Drive itself becomes the object, right? So this is the object right now, and all of you trying to access the file, who are those? You guys are subject, right? Because you're trying to access that file, and I'm the system administrator. I'm also a subject, but I'm, let's say, I'm the one owning this file. So I'm the system administrator, I'm the owner. But end of the day, user A, user B, user C, all of you are users, and you are the subject. So subject are those who are accessing the some objects, and objects in this case, let's say a file. And the rules, as I said, you guys all have access to open the file, read the file, download the file. You can all do that. But if you try to delete the file, I think it will not allow it, because that's the way I expect Google Read Access works, right? View access, that you are not allowed to delete it, but you are able to read it. So this is very important concept, because this concept will drive the rest of the discussion in domain 2. You have to make sure that you understand subject, object, and the rules part. Okay. So let's think about the physical control, right? As I said, there are different levels of control. In this chapter, we're going to read physical control and the logical and technical control. Administrative is more about policy, right? So let's go first about the physical control. So physical control means that when I have, think of a physical control is very simple actually, it's logical all, right? So how can I physically protect? But think of that, right? You go to a building, office building, organization building, a company. So usually what happens, you go to a building, and then in the building, there's a reception, right? You go to reception area, and reception area will ask you where you have to go, right? They will say that I have to go to fifth floor, or I have to meet person X in X company. Okay, then they will say that you are allowed to go or not. Because let's say if you want to meet someone, usually that person would have called the reception that yes, please allow that. And normally reception, what they do, they give you a temporary access card so you can go, right? So means access card, having an access card within a building to maneuver, to walk around, to meet someone is important. If I'm an employee of the building, that's I will already have access card. I will just swap my card, I'll go in. The doors will open for me. But in the same building, there could be certain floors where I have my data center, I have my servers, I have very critical asset, right? I have critical things, my web servers, my file servers, my critical business servers. In that data center, although all the employees will be having access to rest of the building, but data center access will be only for few people, let's say, who are managing the data center, right? Means that even if you are having access to the building, doesn't mean that you have access to everything. So we control physically. We do a lot of things in physical controls. Means that people put fences. You have seen the mobile towers. A lot of places now we have mobile towers. Mobile towers, everyone need access to the mobile, even in remote areas and all that. They put the fence, right? Fence means that not everyone can come to the mobile tower, and then they can do some damage to the cable or anything. Even sometimes animals comes and they can do the damage to the cable and all that. So for that reason, a lot of people put the fence around that. So putting a fence, using your badge, passing through the gates, putting the windows, making sure that building is constructed well, making sure that your cables are in some cable trays, and making sure your security guards are sitting there. Sometimes even you have the dogs guarding the buildings, and you have the camera. So this is all come into the physical access, right? Physically, how you protect access to your building or asset or whatever asset you are trying to protect, right? So this is very important. The first line of defense is always the physical, right? Let's say you have a data center in this building, 6 floors, you have a data center. Someone just walk in and just go to data center and just start putting water buckets in the servers, right? So that will kill your entire business right away. That's the reason. Make sure that you control physically. Not everyone is allowed to go anywhere or everywhere. People are having access and badges, and they go through those lock gates and the sealed windows. And there are a lot of now CCTV cameras came. The CCTV cameras do a lot of fancy work actually. A lot of time they do this, a lot of motion detection and all that, just to make sure that because the security guard is sitting and he cannot monitor 24 cameras at the same time. So sometimes, let's say if in the middle of the night something happens, there's some motion detection based alarms can be set, and they can be triggered, right, to the security guard. So physical controls has a wide range, and anything which is kind of, think of physical meaning, means that your gates, your locks, your swipe cards, and you have these trench tiles, man traps, whatever. It's all into the physical security. This is the first line of defense, right? Before we go and put some fancy systems to secure the passwords and systems and grant access and all that, we have to make sure that we do our part to the physical security of the building or the asset that we are trying to protect. After physically securing, let's say this was a data center or server that where we are keeping our critical data is secured physically, we are satisfied with the security. Then making sure that physical security are not enough, because as I said, right, the physical security is for the people who want to physically walk in and trying to access that thing. But as I said, right, now everything is global, everything is online. People are accessing, so there are hackers sitting in Russia, China, wherever, right? They're trying to access your asset and resources in Europe and wherever, right? So they may not be in physical proximity, they may not be able to walk in, but they will come through internet and so on, right? So make sure that after physical security is for the people who can walk in, but at the same time we also have the logical or technical controls, or right, this is a very important control. And that's where we have most of the jobs for cybersecurity and network people, to make sure that logical controls are in place, right? So think of logical control is like a configuration, right? When, as I said, right, when we try to access Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, right? So what happened? That we are accessing, sitting our home wherever we are sitting in the world, we just try to access. We don't know where the server is, and same thing, hackers don't care, right? Your server is, they try to access over the internet, and they try to breach, right? And same thing, right? When we try to access our application, we don't know where the Facebook server is, we don't know where the Snapchat server is, we just log in, right? So important thing is that no matter where the physically server is, you have to make sure you have the controls. Whoever is allowed to access the application, they are allowed, but everything else is denied. This is called principle of least privilege. Means that I will give you access to do your job, so you can get your job done, but I will not give you more access. And this is very important in cybersecurity. Access management is one of the key principle of the cybersecurity, that people should get access only enough to get your job done. There were old days when people just didn't care. To make it life easy, they just give full access to everyone. And that's where a lot of damage started happening, right? Because people have more access than they say. Let's say in this case, right, you have read access. Okay, you can read it. That's what you need to prepare for the exam and pass the exam. You have to have the read access to the folder, so you can access the resources. Not only these resources, there's also class recording you can access, right? There's some other study material available. So yes, you have all the read access to get your job done to prepare for the exam. But at the same time, if you start coming here and deleting the file, that's not the access you should have, right? In old days, people used to give full access. Now the principle of least privilege came, means that you have access to read, but you don't have access to write or delete anything. So this is the least privilege, right? Segregation of duty comes, means that everyone should have a dedicated set of duties, and they should be, it comes with the, you sublet jobs. Not everyone can do everything, so managers normally give it some duties to some supervisor and some duties to the first line of defense staff and all that. So everyone has their own duty, but normally 2% integrity is important, means that there's always 2% kind of engage, means if one make a mistake or overlook something, second person can always help to correct it, right? So normally example, as I said, example wise, we have seen the Google example, that configuration wise we have giving access, read access to you through the Google GUI and all that. And whatever the settings we can do on the system, sometimes there is a jumper based setting. In old hardware there used to be jumpers, you have to, in old modems you used to have jumpers, you have to, set the jumpers to set the speed and all that. But they used to be old days, mostly it's all configuration based now. Most of the things are software configurable, means that you can set the speed, you can set the level of access through configuration. So you just log in remotely and you can set the access. Let's say in your Instagram profile or some profile, you can make it public or private, right? You can change it configuration wise, that who, if everyone can see my information, or just the people who are my friends can see my information. So this is all configuration based. So logical controls, when we talk about, is mostly about the configuration related. We can do remotely, and we allow or deny access to certain things, and we have to make sure always we have principles of least privilege, that who is allowed to access, only they are able to access. Now logical control, there ISC2 in the documentation, they use these three terms: MAC, DAC, and RBAC. To tell the truth, in the industry, the most common term you will hear in the industry is RBAC. And in the IT, telecom, cybersecurity, RBAC is the most common. DAC and MAC are not very commonly used terms, but since they have mentioned it there, it's good to have the concept about them, right? So MAC, you can think of that is, as the name signifies, mandatory access control. So this is kind of a most restrictive, I would say, that the most controlled environment, right? Means that in this environment, administrator set one level of access to everyone, and that's it, right? Normally in government level documentation, the way government posts the documentation, this is the level of access everyone has. Means that all the user have same level of access, only administrator set it once and forget it. And I think, the way I was thinking, that maybe if you look at it, most of the web pages we access on the internet, right, they are kind of this access. Someone publish an information, the system owner or the administrator or whoever is having the building that web server, they just post some information and the rest of the user just come and access that, right? They have no way to change the information on the website. So this is the way a lot of organizations do the documentation posting, means that they post certain processes, procedures, and standards, and they just give users access to that. Users don't have right to change any documentation. Only the owner of the document, let's say your whoever is the owner, they can change it. This is most restrictive, means that user have no control at all, right? In this mandatory access control, by means that user just see the information, but they have no way to control it. Now second one is discretionary access control, DAC, right? So discretionary access control, what happened in discretionary access control, just let me just quickly correct it, just to, so in discretionary access control, this is, you can say, less restrictive, right? In a sense that it's on a discretion of a person, right? If I am the owner of the document, okay, I can say that, okay, out of certain users, maybe I'm giving you full access. Maybe I can come to this Google document. I can say that, okay, out of you, Mr. X or Miss X will have full access. Rest of you will have still the least access or read access. So owner on their discretion allowed certain user to have full access to the system, right? So it's owner on their discretion has given this additional access. Okay. So means that now these additional the user who have giving this additional access, they can delete the file, they can update the content and all that. But this is again, as I said, right? So in certain cases it happens, right? Let's say a supervisor delegate his role, right? Let's say a supervisor is supposed to create this document and maintain this document. Now supervisor is getting very busy, right? He'll say that, okay, out of my staff, I'll designate one person to control this document on my behalf. So they can designate one person, right? They give that person full access. Out of the users, now one person has more access than others. So not that all the users have same access. So this is called discretionary access control. So MAC and DAC are the terms you should understand. But as I said, most important term in the industry is the RBAC, role-based access control. RBAC. This is a very common term in the industry, at least now. RBAC, role-based means that every role I can assign a thing, right? And if you see that, I mean, in my view, DAC and RBAC are kind of having some similarities. Means that in RBAC access control, the administrator will say that certain user, okay, one user is administrator, one user is, let's say, creator of the file, one user, and rest of the user are just the read user of the file. Means that every user you can define a role. Based on the role, you can say that certain are able to create. Let's say I can say that, okay, this folder, ISC2 certified folder, certain user out of you can create files. Okay, everyone can read it, but let's say creating a file is only X number of users can create a file. Okay, Mr. Y or Miss Y can delete a file. So based on role, I can define. So it goes on to more granularity, right? It goes on a very specific detail level. That every I define the roles, and this is what happening on the industry right now. This is how the big organization or mostly organization works. What happened that they define the role, right? Let's say SOC analyst. There's a role called SOC analyst. There's a role called network analyst. There's a role called system administrator. These are technical roles, right? So these people, and there are just ordinary users, right? Which, so I'm putting a web server. So there are certain people who can update the content on the website. There are maybe the system administrator. There are certain people who are able to do something more than the others. So there are specific roles for that, right? So maybe SOC has access to certain files, certain breaches data and threat data and certain data which other users or NOC doesn't have it, right? So it means that system analyst, NOC, IT admins, there could be different roles we can have. Let's say IT admin has more access to a system because he's the IT guy. He's the one who's fixing all the problem. But at the end of the day, if a finance or sales guy, he don't need to access all those tools, right? So it means that every role is defined and every role is mapped to certain number of users, right? So as I said, right? So DAC and RBAC, I have some similarities. Industry well-known term is RBAC. So think of RBAC as we create different roles and we assign roles to different peoples. So normally, like the user management is a general term. Is also, I think, identity governance. IGA is called normally in the industry. Is that when the employee comes, like when you join a company, they create your account in their systems. They give you access to certain things. Let's say if you are in sales, you will get access to the sales data or sales file folder or in sales application. And if you are in IT, you will get access to certain other application and data. Means that every employee is onboarding means that they create their account, they assign the account to certain roles, and you start doing your job. But let's say after a certain time, you change your position. You are in finance now. Let's say you are in sales now. It means that you were accessing the financial data before, right? Now you are want to access the sales data. Means that someone has to do this account modification. Someone has to move because you were mapped to the role of the finance before. So you are accessing finance thing. Now someone has to modify your role from finance to the sales, so you can access the sales data. Because as I said, role-based access control ensures that every role is accessing the resources they need to access. Finance files should not be accessed by sales staff, maybe, right? That could be the policy in the company. So it means that now someone has to change or modify your account. Say that this account X was finance, now this account X is sales now. So someone has to, this is normally done through Active Directory. So let's say someone went for extended leave, right? Normally in the larger companies, the policy is that when going for extended leave, let's say going for some medical leave, 2-3 months leave, they will disable your account, temporarily disable your account, right? Because they know that you're going to come back, But let's say 3 months, what if some hacker hacked into your account and misused the information, right? Because they know that somehow they that you are not in the company. So means that they will disable, means that account is not deleted, it's still in the system, but they will not allow you to access any system. Okay. Means that you change the employee. Now, let's say you change the job, you moved out of the company, right? So they will delete your account immediately. So this part comes into the offboarding thing, right? So you have onboarding and then offboarding, right? So these are the thing. Normally the role-based access control falls, and a lot of people who do this thing, and this is the normally falls into the cybersecurity has a role to play in this role-based access control, because we are the one who kind of working with the teams to ensure that roles are mapped to the, making sure that every role, the policies are there in every role and everyone is allowed to access, because a lot of times controls are happening on the active directory or sometimes in the firewalls, and cybersecurity is the team who's doing managing these firewalls, right? Mostly active directory not always managed by cybersecurity team, but normally on a lot of time people have firewalls policy also just to map to the active directory roles. So in that case, role of a cybersecurity becomes important. But apart from cybersecurity, it's important to understand the general concept of the access control. As I said, access control concepts are important. It's logical, and it makes sense that from the business perspective, right? So whatever we are doing, we have to make sure that it should make sense from the business perspective. So this was it actually from the access control perspective. So we understand that physical access control, logical access control. Logical access control has three types: DAC, MAC, and RBAC. RBAC is the most common industry term, but from the exam perspective, you have to make sure you understand MAC and DAC also, because I think there were a few questions on MAC, DAC, and RBAC. You have to understand these concepts very well. Physical control is just common sense. Make sure that you read this documentation, which is in this study guide on in your ISC material, right? So make sure it's thick and large and dry theory, but you go through that, right? Defines in depth concept, privilege access management, how user are provisioned, deleted, what type of physical control, what type of access control mechanism. And at the end of the day, as I said, I'll emphasize everyone to go through these definitions, because these definitions will help you with exam, as well as is help you building your general knowledge and understanding about cybersecurity, right? Because these terms will again and again be used in generally in the IT industry, right? It's not just cybersecurity. So make yourself familiar with these terminologies. They will help you overall in your career path. So any questions anyone has right now before we close off?